Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for being here today and providing this important testimony. Um, let's be clear about this. The Biden administration and Secretary Mayorkas did not inherit the crisis at the border. They created it. Ignoring the desperate pleas from affected and scared families nationwide, Secretary Mayorkas has intentionally disregarded the law, leaving the border open to an endless stream of migrant, drug, and cartel members. My time as a sheriff, and if I was neglecting my duties to enforce the law, it would have cost me my job. The secretary should be held to the same standard. Mr. Drummond, your story about the illegal Chinese national who executed the 3 men, that's really stuck with me. The reports are clear that terrorist organizations are exploiting the vulnerability of our nation's border. It is simply irresponsible that Secretary Mayorkas continues to ignore the significant threat to our national security. Do you believe Secretary Mayorkas' actions have emboldened terrorists around the world? And is it fair to say he has intentionally ignoring our nation's current laws that should make it harder to enter our country illegally?
I think that it is indisputable that we have terrorist organizations invading my state. We've identified numerous gangs, numerous syndicated crime organizations, and they only grow on a daily basis.
Mr. Knudsen and Mr. Bailey, would you care to comment on this as well?
I would point out that the 2 lawsuits that we have pending right now dealing with the parole process, the abuse of the parole process, Secretary Mayorkas' violation of the plain text of the statute as it relates to parole and his promulgation of the circumvention rule have been described as engaging in a child trafficking delivery service. So it's not just that he's emboldening the enemies of the United States, he's actually actively participating in some of the harms by using support networks to allow for illegal immigration that used to be considered unlawful through the stroke of his pen without congressional authority.
Congressman, I wholeheartedly agree. I mean, I can tell you the increased gang activity in my state. I can tell you the increase in firearm crime in my state, increase in officer-involved shootings. We can tie this all directly to the cartel drug problems that is flooding my state. We've seen fentanyl seizures in my state rise by some measurements up from 11,000% in my state just since 2019. Those are numbers that we were not seeing prior to this administration change. I think that's pretty staggering.
Thank you. Mr. Drummond, in your state and many others, we've had taken steps to safeguard our communities because we cannot rely on this administration to protect us. For example, Mississippi, my home state, has set up a fentanyl strike force to tackle the influx of drugs. I noticed that the state of Oklahoma has also formed a similar task force. Can you elaborate on some of the findings of that task force?
Yes, we have created an organized crime task force with the explicit purpose of coordinating with other state agencies to tackle this endemic of illegal immigration in the state of Oklahoma and the drugs and the detriment that they drag into the state. And it's come at an extremely high cost for the state. We've allocated an additional $3 million for my office just to staff that. And the toll on human, it's just remarkable.
Are there any recommendations, the task force findings, that you could recommend to the Congress to consider implementing on a federal level?
It would be very helpful if the terrorism category, if cartels would be listed as foreign terrorist organizations. Right now, they fall outside that immigration inadmissibility definition, and if they were designated as such, it would give us strength in deportation.
Also, in your testimony, you pointed out that smaller law enforcement departments are outmanned, outgunned, and ill-equipped to address the threats coming across our border, particularly the threats from the Mexican and Chinese drug syndicates. I can sympathize with this and certainly understand the stress that is placed on our rural law enforcement officers when dealing with such a rise in crime. As departments are forced and stretch their resources addressing pressing issues, can you talk a little bit about the ripple effects and the gaps it leaves in our critical areas of law enforcement and safety for our communities?
It has truly taken the attention of all law enforcement in the state of Oklahoma toward this issue, where we have a shell owner buying a piece of property, pushing up berms of dirt with bulldozers, manning those with semi-automatic weapons at the top. Very intimidating for our local law enforcement. They're outgunned, outmanned, and our resources are stretched in the state.
Thank you, Mr. Drummond, and the other witnesses as well for your input today. Once again, the committee has shown that Secretary Mayorkas bears direct responsibility for the chaos at the border. I will not tolerate the overlooking of real threats that are jeopardizing innocent lives. His failures demand swift accountability. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.